So a bunch of House Republicans, even Chip Roy, got mad at the Senate Republicans for including this provision at the 11th hour that would essentially allot 8 Republican senators, each $500,000. The legal reasoning here is so weak. But of course, Chip Roy doesn't mention any of that. He just gets mad at them for allotting money to themselves, which is totally reasonable. But I want to talk about what these senators are actually complaining about when it comes to Arctic frost. And was Arctic frost this FBI overreach that violated this Senate statute that they're all talking about? But here's Chip Roy.
I just want to add that I share the concerns of the gentleman from Georgia. I do not think that this provision should have been inserted. It certainly shouldn't have been inserted at the 11th hour without deliberation and back and forth. I do believe that the gentleman's correct. There were Democrats and Republicans involved with it. But I think there's going to be a lot of people, if they look and understand this, are going to see it as self-serving, self-dealing kind of stuff, and I don't think that's right. And I understand that I think some of the motivations were to try to target a DOJ that I think was fairly obviously abusing its authority and targeting United States senators, separation of powers concerns, all the things. We can debate all that, but we think it was pretty egregious, so I have no problem with the prospect of going after and trying to empower, even through private right of action, a way to go, because we do it in other contexts, consent decrees and other things, but the retroactive, potential to have dollars going to United States senators when we've got American citizens, whether it was J6ers, whether it was people from the FACE Act, whether it was others that have also had the full force of the federal government through the Department of Justice targeting and coming down on them, and they're going to see, oh, but you can slide in a provision in here for United States senators? It is beside my comprehension that this got put in the bill. And it's why people have such a low opinion of this town. I am torn also, the gentleman from Georgia, because we need to fund the government and we need to get this passed. And I'm trying to figure out what we can do to force the Senate's hand to say you're going to repeal this provision and fix it without amending it here.
So obviously he's at least partially correct. Senators should not seek to have these provisions that apply to 8 people in the entire United States. Obviously, it is private right of action, so there would have to be a judge. Only a Trump judge would ever award the $500,000, though, because the law is so weak that they are referring to. So they are essentially saying that any action, and this law passed by Congress that they are referring to, which I'll get to in a second, does not include any right to private action, right? And I don't have a problem necessarily with having a right to private action here. It's just the justification is basically nothing, and to slide it into a bill, it's just absurd and shows the priorities of these people. So here's what the thing actually says. Any senator whose Senate data or the Senate data of whose Senate office has been acquired, subpoenaed, searched, accessed, or disclosed in violation of this section, I'll get to the section here in a second, may bring a civil action against the United States if the violation was committed by an officer, employee, agent of the United States, or federal department or agency. And the statute that they are referring to is 2 U.S. Code 6628C, which states that any provider for a Senate office shall not be barred through operation of any court order or any statutory provision from notifying the Senate office of legal processing seeking disclosure of Senate data of the Senate office. So essentially it says that no provider may be barred from notifying the investigation of Senate data. Now the main problem here, and you might be saying, well, that sounds like a violation. Arctic frost was a violation then. No, because this wasn't Senate data. It was the toll data on these senators' personal phones. I believe Senate data would have to be their own Senate lines, their own Senate offices. So, no, I don't think that this would ever apply here. And certainly it would be a new, a sort of new interpretation of it. Arctic frost, right? This whole victimization complex is so hilarious because Arctic frost literally just got the tolling data. It was when was the call made and who was it made between. It was not like wiretapping in on like what exactly they were saying. No, it was literally just logistical, right? All this Arctic frost data that was never used right? It was a broad-based investigation that pulled a ton of information and narrowed down on some specific aspects of it, but it was very, very vague information. Now, if it was actual Senate data, then I would agree with the provision that it was a violation, but this provision did not have a right to seek retribution or any kind of dollar amount. And that is what is being shown with this Senate provision. Like, do you need to specifically implement the right to private action in this clean CR? Right? It's not a clean CR. You are deliberately holding your own priorities above the priorities of other people by including this provision. Now, I don't know what he's talking about when he says that the Democrats and Republicans talked about this. Is he talking about the 8 Democrats who just like surrendered everything? It's so embarrassing still that they surrendered and gave up nothing and ceded this, right? They gave up nothing and they just gave them $500,000 if there's a Trump judge, a Trump civil judge that is going to award these penalties. Because this did make it to the final provision, it was never forced back to the Senate. I believe because Donald Trump already voted on it, so they didn't have time, or they just didn't think it was worth it. Because at the end of the day, $3.5 million or $4 million of retribution or penalty is just not worth the Senate's time. It's the advantage of being a senator, right? If you slip in something for your own local needs or yourself even, oftentimes it's just not worth the hassle to even negotiate it. So you just kind of get away with it. But I'll be interested to see if they actually rule that 2 U.S.C. 6628 was really violated. And even if it was, it's just a very technical, like useless observation. Because like this stuff happens all the time. Like the federal government can very clearly investigate crimes against the United States. So like, say they did notify you, what does that change? The Arctic frost was still very justified. I believe that these were obtained under Jack Smith. Well, Arctic frost was beginning of 2022, and then it got inherited by Jack Smith, and then these were actually transmitted in 2023. So, nothing changes about this. Besides you knowing that you're being investigated, which a lot of them probably did. Because, if there's a massive violent insurrection at the Capitol, you kind of want to know who was talking about it and who could have played a role in it. That's why everything was subpoenaed. Turning Point USA, Fox News Communications, to see who was involved. Because so many people got prosecuted for this. There's no reason why the investigation should be super small. Especially if there's some kind of reason to believe that any of these senators were supporting Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump was the person in power, that he was Republican. It's not out of the question that a lot of Republican senators could support him in his dishonest attempts to defraud the entire electoral system. But